Hi, this is a video to explain some of the standard music notation that we're going to be using, which is rhythm notation. So it's kind of important to understand the difference between a whole note, half note, quarter note, eighth note, 16th note, and how they relate to one another. So here we go. So let's say we take a pizza pie. Hope you've had lunch. Take a pie, and that is what we call a whole note. So you could actually draw a whole note if we wanted to represent a whole note, just one circle, and that's a whole note like the whole pie. And for our purposes, a whole note, it will equal 4 beats. So every time you see a whole note, it will last over 4 beats. And we'll explain that in another video. So let's take our whole note and let's just draw a line and cut this pizza pie in half. Pretty simple. What you wind up getting are 2 half notes, right? One representing each side of the pie. So a half note is drawn by a whole note, and then you put this line right next to it. That line is quite convenient. So this is 1 half note. So I have a half note on one side of the pizza here, and then a half note on the other side of the pizza here, just to show that we have 2 halves equal the whole. So that's what a half note is. I can continue on this quest and I could draw another line, and now what I've done is divided this pizza into 4 parts. So now I wind up having not just a half note, but what's called a quarter note. So to draw a quarter note, I'm going to take my half note with my line, and all I'm going to do is fill it in. And that's why you make 1 quarter note. But we don't just have 1 quarter in the whole, we have 4. So each one of these little areas of the pie, this big huge slice of the pie, is a quarter note. So you're going to need 4 of them if you have 4 in one measure. Now, of course, you don't just need 4 consecutive, that means all in a row, quarter notes, one after the other. You could have a half note on one side that takes up half, and then I could have 2 quarters. So that's how you get 1 whole note here. You fill it in. Great, let's continue on. Now, instead of just having 4 slices of a pie, we never have 4 slices of a pie, do we? No, you usually have 8 slices of a pie. So you can take this pizza and just kind of keep dividing it up, right? And keep adding and cutting into it. Now that looks more like a slice of pizza, not all that even, not very good at cutting. But now what I've done is each one of these now represents not a quarter of the pie, but now I have what? This one section here is not just 1 quarter of the pie, but it's actually 1/8 of the pie. Sorry about my artwork. So each one of these represents 1/8 of the pie. Why? Because now how many sections of this pie do we have? If we keep going and drawing this in. That's right, we'll have 8 sections of the pie. So that's kind of important to know. Now how do I draw a 1/8 note? Well, I'm going to take this quarter note that I have here, right, which is a half filled in. And what am I going to do? I'm going to hang this thing off of it called a flag. A flag, the rule for flags is every time you add a flag to the note, you take the note that you added to and you cut it in half. So I took a quarter note and I cut it in half. So this is 1/8 note, which means that this is also 1/8 note right here. That's 1/8 note. So I have an eighth note there also. And that each one of these represents 1/8 note. Well, we don't usually see 1/8 note by itself. Sometimes we see 2/8 notes together. And it would be a little awkward to see 2/8 notes just one next to the each other. Sometimes you'll see that in choral music. So if you say you have a word that has 2 syllables, like ta, it will have the u under 1/8 note and then the ta under another eighth note, so that we have 2 syllables, and it'll show you the 2 different notes. It's awkward to see this in a lot of instrumental music, and sometimes you just want to have consecutive eighth notes, one after the other. So what they do is they take this flag and flip it up and flip this over, and really what you wind up getting is, instead of 2 individual notes, but consecutive eighth notes are actually drawn together using not flags, but this thing here called a beam. So we had 1 flag before, remember, 1 flag, and now we're going to put 2 of them together, and now we can have a beam, 1 beam. We'll put 2/8 notes together. Great. So 2/8 notes take up the same space as a quarter. I have 2/8 notes. Well, we can keep going just one more step further. You can go a lot of steps further if you like, but we're just going to take it one more step further. And we'll grab this and we'll divide this yet again. And so what you wind up getting are not eighth notes, but what do you wind up getting? 16th notes. So we keep going just by dividing all these eighth notes together, and it starts to get a little confusing. So let me see if I can make that a little clearer, more clear. And so now each one of these little wedges of the pie represents a 16th note. And how many 16th notes do you have inside of 1/8 note? You have 2 inside of 1/8 note. See, this eighth note has 2 slices. And how many do you have inside of 1/4? Right here, 1/4. How many? 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So to draw a 1/16th note, we're going to come here and draw it just like it's an eighth. And do you remember the rule for flags? Well, that's 1/8 note. Every time I add a flag, it divides it in half. So each one of these little wedges is 1/16th note, like this. That's what that is, 1/16th. Now it's a little awkward to be seeing all these 4/16th notes in a row like this, so the rule still applies. If I wanted to have consecutive 16th notes, what I can do is draw my stems, right? Draw my note heads attached to the stem, and instead of drawing two little flags next to each one of these, I can just use a beam. And now I can beam together 16th notes. So what's the difference between 16th notes and eighth notes? Well, eighth notes have one beam or one flag, right? One flag here. And 16th notes have 2 beams or 2 flags. And that's how you divide up the pie. There are 4 16ths inside of one beat. We'll talk more about this in the next video.